Welcome. Is our IT thing working? Okay. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Oklahoma City Planning Commission for Thursday, February 28th. If you have a cell phone with you, now would be a good time to shut it off. That's what I'm getting ready to do. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, or who don't join us every other Thursday, the way this still works is a few things to take care of kind of up front that somebody told me recently I should not refer to as housekeeping, but that's how I think of it. And then when we get to the part of the agenda where we're going to hear the cases individually, we'll have each one of the applicants come forward, give us their name and address for the record, tell us what it is they're here asking for. We may ask them some questions. If there's anybody else here who wants to be heard on that item, we'll have them do the same thing. We may have some questions of them. Then we may or may not discuss amongst ourselves, and we'll vote on each item in turn. The first order of business for today is the receipt of the minutes from the February 14th meeting.
Move approved.
I have a motion and a second to receive the minutes of the February 14th Planning Commission meeting. Cast your votes, please. They are received. Are we expecting Commissioner Highsmith? Do we know? Does anybody know? No? Well, we'll just proceed without him and see how far we get. Continuance requests?
We have two uncontested continuance requests. That's item 18 for ED 225 defer to March 14th, and item 19 B18 to March 14th.
Is there anybody present who wished to be heard on either one of those two items? If not, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Move the continuances request as read.
Second.
We'll miss Ms. Previtt too. I hadn't realized. I have a motion and a second to continue items 18 and 19. Would you cast your votes, please? They are continued.
We have one new continuance. It's item 10, SPUD 1104, defer to March 14th.
Is there anyone present who wished to be heard on that item today? If not, I'll take a motion.
Moved.
I have a motion and a second to continue item 10. Would you cast your votes, please? It is continued. I have asked that item number 15 be pulled and continued from today's docket. There just seems to be a little bit of confusion about where we're standing with respect to the policies on EMD signage in Bricktown, and I'd like to do a little bit further review of that item. The applicant, I believe, is willing.
That's fine. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. We can, 2 weeks?
It's fine.
Okay, sure.
So I'll take a motion. Continue item number 15.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue item number 15. Would you cast your votes, please?
That's 2 weeks till March 14th, right? Okay.
Would you cast your votes, please? It is continued. Anyone else who has anything that they want to have continued while we're at it? If not, we have items on the docket that are relatively routine, for which there has been no protest. They're not quite administrative, but they're ones that are considered non-controversial enough that we vote on them as a block, that we call our consent docket. Would you read those for us, please, Mr. Chambliss?
I'll read those into the record. First one is item 1, PC 10-565 to rezone 11604 North I-35 to the I-1 Light Industrial District. Item 2, PC 10-567 to rezone 5904 Ranger Lane to I-2 Moderate Industrial District. And item 3, C7052, the final plat of Morgan Creek, Section 2.
Is there anyone present who wishes to be heard on any of those items? If not, I'll take a motion. You do? Would you want to come forward? Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're about to approve these items, and if there was any question about that part. If not, I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent docket items 1, 2, and 3.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve items 1, 2, and 3. Would you cast your votes, please? They are approved.
And the first item for individual consideration is item 4, C7051, preliminary plat of Kingsbridge West, Phase 4.
Good afternoon. Kendall Dillon with Crafton Toll, representing the applicant, and this is an application for a preliminary plat on what will be the last phase of the Kingsbridge West addition. There currently is an active preliminary plat that covers the majority of this site. However, if you look in your staff report, you'll notice there's a tract that's about a 7.5-acre tract that's located at the southwest corner of the site. That tract was actually omitted or not included in the active original preliminary plat, presumably to be a commercial corner at some point in time. That particular tract is zoned R1 now. My client now owns it, and so that being the case, we have revised the layout from the original preliminary plat to incorporate this additional tract at the corner, and thereby doing that, it requires a new preliminary plat, which is the purpose of this application. So the preliminary plat conforms your subdivision regulations, your zoning ordinance. I think there's 4 standard TEs that we're in agreement with, and we'd ask for your approval.
Our staff report drawing does not show the incorporation of that piece of property. I mean, it's inside the box, but it doesn't show what you're planning
If
to do
you
with it.
look, at least in my staff report, you'll notice this gray kind of dashed line that creates a square.
Yes.
That's the tract that is included in this preliminary plat that was not in the original one.
Right, but it doesn't show what the design, how you're going to incorporate it into the R1.
That is the layout. It's a common area at the corner, and then,
Oh.
so if you see the dashed line, you can kind of see how that the lots encroach into that now.
I see. So what's the big open piece
That's the
there?
common
It's
area.
just going to
There'll be
stay
a
big
pond.
open piece? Okay,
Right.
all right. Commissioners, do we have any questions of Mr. Dillon? Is there anyone present who wishes to be heard on this item? If not, I'll take a motion. I guess I did have one question for you. You've got a 20-foot setback, is that right, on all these lots? Is that enough for a,
It meets code.
but I mean, is it enough for a car to park in front of a garage and not
Yes.
hang over a sidewalk?
Yes.
I'll take a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 4. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 5 is C7047. It's the final plat of Kingsbridge West, Phase 4.
Again, for the record, Kendall Dillon with Crafton Toll, representing the applicant. Obviously, final plat of it's an exact duplicate of the preliminary plat you just approved, and I think there's 2 standard TEs, so we agree with those and ask for your approval.
Is there anyone present who wishes to be heard on this item? Commissioners, comments, questions, or concerns? If not, I'll take a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 5. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 6 is SP 518. It's an application for special permit, Kim Falk Paramount Partners, for a light industrial use, a brewery located at 701 West Sheridan Avenue.
Good afternoon. Catherine Montgomery with the Preservation and Design Studio. We're the architects for the building owner. And I have with me today representatives of the building ownership and the two businesses that are seeking this special zoning. One is a brewery and one is a cidery. If you have any questions for them.
I did have some question about the hours of operation on this. I'm a little unclear. Staff report indicates that the hours of the tap room are permitted by the client's alcohol license. It sets out that they will be Wednesday and Thursday, noon to midnight, Friday and Saturday, is that right? No, 4 to 10 p.m. Wednesday and Thursday, noon to midnight Friday and Saturday, noon to 6 p.m. Sunday.
So the manufacturing of the product, there are hours associated with that, and then there are hours associated with actually operating the tap room. They will both be getting their own independent liquor licenses, and their hours will be dictated for the tap room by those licenses. And then the operation hours for the light industrial, for the manufacture of the product, was what we interpreted that the Planning Commission was actually seeking in order to change the zoning for light industrial. So you have two separate kinds of hours there.
This is kind of, okay. So the hours that I just read are the hours of the tap room, is that right? Because it says brewing will occur primarily on Saturday and Sunday.
Yes, so you have two facilities, and brewing is going to happen on Saturday and Sunday, and then how much production, that's for the Core 4 brewing, and then Oklahoma Cider Company has different production hours. So you have two businesses seeking the same kind of zoning for the same building or property, and they each have tap room hours and they each have manufacturing hours.
Okay, okay. But, so my question is,
Yeah.
more of an internal question, I guess, do we have the authority to regulate under the special permit the hours of operation? And primarily, I guess, I'm concerned about the part of it that's open to the public, the tap room.
No, I think that under state law, we would have to be consistent with whatever state law allows them to do under a special permit. So it couldn't be inconsistent with that. So whatever their state law license hours are is what I think we would have to go by. We couldn't do something different than that.
So this is specifically a question that the staff had for us, so we went ahead and answered the question as far as hours of operation are concerned.
So in other words, these are the hours that are provided by the state. Is that correct?
These fit within the state requirements, and these hours were provided by each of the operators for these two businesses, for your information today.
So my question is, these hours mean anything at all to us? Or, I mean, are they just here for,
Discussion topic.
yeah, wish list kind of, yeah, I mean, it's like, this is a special permit. Are we permitted to hold them to the hours that they have indicated that they will adhere to or not?
As long as they're consistent with state law, yes, that can be part of the special permit. What I'm saying is it couldn't be something inconsistent with state law. We couldn't require them to be closed sooner than what state law would allow them to be closed.
So no, these hours are not really meaningful. We couldn't allow them to be open beyond what state law would allow, but we're not able to require them to be open less than state law would allow.
Correct.
So should we strike that language? What is the,
you know,
Yeah, I don't know why it wouldn't just say hours of operation will be in accordance as permitted by client's alcohol license. I mean, I don't know why we would want to memorialize operational hours that are meaningless to us in here, and then the state law were to change or something like that, and now we've got these codified or memorialized hours of operation. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me, or, you know.
agree?
I think these were just more hours for your information. They're within the state law requirements, but they're not held to those hours. They're less than what the state law requirements would be.
I think we need to be really clear about this, that the hours of operation are what they're permitted to operate under state law, period. It's nice that you've provided us this information. We appreciate it, especially since we apparently asked you for it. Don't get me wrong. But in terms of our decision-making process, they're really meaningless. They're not held to these in any way, shape, or form. They are able to operate whatever hours. Do we happen to know? Does anybody happen to know what the hours of operation are that are permitted under state law?
There are certain hours that are permitted from the taproom perspective. It's my understanding, and as much as I'm an expert on this stuff, it's my understanding that you may desire to know what hours they're going to be manufacturing in case that would create some kind of disturbance that you would be opposed to, as when we interpreted the question. So since it's a pretty, simple process, it's not like creating a lot of noise or smell or other things that are offensive, I too believe that it's inconsequential. But the question was, what are their hours of operation? So we offered that up.
Tap rooms can be open until 2 a.m.? I'm being told by the audience.
Have it with me.
Yeah, they're actually here.
Let's seek actual expert advice on this rather than...
Well, I know we have another item today that's going to deal with this, and I assume that we'll hear more about it.
Tell us, Susan, what's the deal?
I don't have the state statute with me on
Oh, you
hours.
don't? I thought you said you did have.
Not on the tap rooms or breweries.
Would you please?
My name is Steve McCaleb with Derryberry Nafee Law Firm, and I'm here on as co-counsel with Agenda Item 13. And I would direct your legal counsel to look at Title 37A, Section 3-125. And that gives guidance on state law as to hours of service. And I'll just read it to you if that's okay.
Would you please?
No alcoholic beverages may be sold, dispensed, served, or consumed on the premises of a mixed beverage, caterer, public event, charitable event, special event, on-premises beer and wine, small brewer or brew pub licensee between the hours of 2 a.m. and 8 a.m.
So we're talking 7 days a week, 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. is the only portion of it that's shut down.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so,
That's consumption.
Well, I don't have a dog in this fight on this agenda item. I'm just trying to.
I agree, but he just wanted to be clear.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
consumption.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, that's 37A, Section 3-125.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you very much.
Thank you.
So I think we need to keep that in mind, where this is kind of a new approach and process for us as we're, converting from our previous ABC zoning applications for this kind of use to a special permit use. So I just want to be clear as we're making these decisions that we know what we're deciding.
Well, and I'm inclined to agree with the previous comments that while this pub, or operation, may desire these hours, a subsequent sale of the business, they would potentially have to come back to get there. If we were able to place this restriction on them, they'd have to come back and get it lifted, be able to do whatever hours they wanted to do. This is a voluntary statement that they made as a business decision, not a legal decision. It's just a pure business decision for these folks. So,
Well, one thing I might add, you're really not approving the consumption here. You're approving a brewery. The consumption of the alcohol would be accessory to that brewery.
Accessory to the brewery.
Which is a permitted use. So it's the industrial use that requires the special permit. That's the manufacturing.
And according to the chart, the zoning chart, this use is permitted by special permit.
Right.
So if these businesses go out of business and someone else takes over, then they're back here for a special permit because they're being only granted to these proprietors, from my understanding.
You agree with that statement? Okay, so now that we're clear about where we are, did you have a question?
I do. Is this project in design review yet?
Yes. So we currently have a downtown design review. We're also doing other things to the building. For example, we're doing P&D Studio is doing an elevator addition on the west side. It was previously approved. That certificate of approval lapsed, and it has been re-upped. And because we're looking at fire and life safety for the overall building and accessibility, that's why we're putting in a nice new modern elevator. These businesses are both on the ground level, so neither one of them need that. And there are no changes to the exterior for the Core 4, which is going inside the brick building. And the cidery, at this moment, there's no changes. But should there be changes, we're prepared to submit to Downtown Design Review and have already spoken with staff and know that whatever changes that we may make are within staff approval authority.
I ask because of the chain link fence.
That's not part of, we're not doing anything with that.
I'd really like to see it come down, and I know we're not here to talk about that today, but, I mean, you guys are in an area...
On the alley side, you mean?
In the front side.
It's no longer chain link.
Have you guys removed it? I haven't been down that way in a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's wires that are about, I don't know, 12 to 16 inches apart, so it's still a barrier, so you can't just go into the parking lot. But it's there.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that then. Thank you.
Anybody else? Is there anybody here today that wanted to be heard on this item? I'll take a motion. Commissioner Highsmith?
Sure. I move to recommend approval on item SP 518, striking the language for the hours of operation, and potentially adding language that it would be consistent with state law. Does that sound?
Second.
All right.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 6 with the amendment of removal of the hours of operation and indication that those hours of operation will be consistent with state law. Or perhaps maybe it would be better to say consistent with, as it does, the client's alcohol license. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 7 is C 7053, the final plat of Tucker Industrial Park.
Good afternoon, Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates here on behalf of the applicant. We were here a few months ago on rezoning this tract to industrial under a PUD. And the big concern at that time was that there would be a big box warehouse here. So there was requirements in the PUD that would screen it from the north and things like that. So this is the first part of the next process, and that's we're coming in with a final plat to plat smaller lots for smaller industrial and leaving this as one big block that would remain available for a bigger box. As you will recall, there was a lot of discussion about access to Hefner Road, so we eliminated that from the PUD, as well as created what's in red is a buffer that's still AA, and so we do not have access to Hefner or any other location. Hence, that's our request to have a variance for the longer cul-de-sac. We do agree with all the technical evaluations, and we are asking for a variance on item 2 for the longer cul-de-sac.
Mr. Johnson, I'm sure we probably talked about this ad nauseum before, but it's completely slipped my mind. Why did we not just go ahead and include the land but limit it to the AA? Why did we take the land out of the PUD rather than leave it in and designate it as, AA or open space or?
It was the owner of the property's desire to go, because it's in his name, to go ahead and pull it out and leave it as something he could build a single-family residence on a 5-acre tract at some point in time. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Does anybody have any questions of Mr. Johnson? Is there anybody present who wishes to be heard on this item? We need a separate vote on the variance. I'll take a motion.
Wrong button. Move to approve item number 7 and with the technical evaluations.
We need to move to approve the variance.
Variance first?
Yes, please.
I move to approve the variance of item 7. Am I reading that correctly?
Close enough.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve variance to table 5.1 in section 5.3.2.a subdivision regulations. Item number 7, would you cast your votes, please? It is approved. Now I'll take a motion on item number 7.
I move to approve item number 7 with the listed technical evaluations. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 7, subject to the TEs. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 8 is C-7049, the preliminary plat of Autumn Park.
Again, Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates here on behalf of the applicant of this application. Again, we were before you not that long ago rezoning this tract into a PUD, which allows for 30,000 square foot lots with the extension of public water. And as you may recall, there was a lot of discussion about getting public sewer to this site. After a year's effort of negotiation with the property owner to the west, we were unsuccessful in getting an easement. The resultant of that, had we brought sewer to this site, would be that we'd be asking for R1 in the previous zoning application. Because we could not get the sewer to the site, we ended up with 30,000 square foot lots, which yields right at 80 lots for the whole 80 acres. I am in receipt of a letter that from the HOA president to the north, and I was able to respond to him via email and then by a phone call, and I think I satisfied his concerns and explained the issues with regard to using the aerobic systems. There has been some discussion, I think there's somebody here to speak today, about the concern of aerobic system on 30,000 square foot lots. The state law requires or allows it, and we don't see a problem with it, but there may be somebody that wants to discuss that. Also here again today is Sally Henderson, who was at the zoning, and if you'll recall, she was adamant about not wanting a street stub to the east, and so as a result of that, we have a variance. Item number 2 on the staff report that talks about varying the requirement to connect to adjoining properties. So that was purposeful, and Ms. Henderson, I'm sure, still supports that. She does not plan on ever developing her property and does not want a connection. And so with that, we agree with all the other TEs and be happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any questions of Mr. Johnson?
When was the PUD approved?
I do not recall the exact date. It's been a couple months.
Okay, so it's been recent. That's what I thought. Okay. It was last year, in other words.
Yeah, the end of last year, correct.
I actually would like to speak to the property owner next door. If she's present and wants to talk to us. Could you give us your name and address for the record?
Sally Henderson, 6701 East Britton Road.
The reason I wanted to talk to you is that, we have a really strong policy of connectivity with respect to these large pieces of land that are being residentially developed, particularly, well, maybe not particularly, but it gives me particular pause, I guess, to see that policy set aside on a piece of property, and now here I'm talking about your piece of property, that actually sits on the corner of two section line roads like Air Depot and Britton Road. I understand that you don't have any desire to see your property developed, and may keep it in your land and in your family, and if it's in your family for the next 100 years, so be it. I'm a little reluctant to forego the possibility of connectivity, which is what would happen if we allow the property next door to be developed in a way that there's no place to put a connection in the future. So I wonder if you have an objection that you can articulate to me about having a street stub that ends at your property line that, is not going to go through as long as you don't want it to.
It's interesting to me that you would ask that question because you and I had that discussion the last time I was here, and you understood completely and responded very sympathetically to that, which is why it was agreed upon that day, and I sat down and kept my mouth shut from then on. So I don't understand what's happened in that short period of time that's made you change your mind. I will reiterate what I said. In that area where I live, any stub or any place that a person can park where they don't belong, believe me, they will park where they don't belong. There will be activities there that will disturb the other residents and myself, even though there will be a fence there. I don't want to know that there is access during the building phase, during any phase, where people can pull off onto a paved area unattended and do whatever they want. And you can look at the crime rate in our area and know that there is constantly a car where it's not supposed to be, vandalism of all kinds, running people off property, and there's no need to just ask for that kind of trouble.
Madam Chair, may I interrupt? I think I can clarify this real quick.
Okay.
Ms. Henderson was so adamant, we actually put language in the PUD that does not allow the stub to go to the east, and it was purposely done because of that.
Well, I could tell that from the language and stuff. I'm sorry, I do not recall that conversation, and I guess maybe I've just become more of an adherent, if you will. So it causes me some pause, and I'm glad to have you articulate that. It's helpful. Thank you. I assume that we're long past being okay with this from your perspective, so.
Yeah, we are, okay.
Okay.
There may be somebody else here to speak, I don't know.
Is there anyone else here who wants to be heard on this item?
Yes.
Would you come forward, please? Give us your name and address for the record.
Yes,
Kyle Isbell. I live at 6312. We live in the addition to the north, and as Mr. Johnson has stated, he had talked to our HOA president, and I guess the timing of all of this, nobody had realized, because I think everybody was under the assumption that when this was put into action, that they'd be 1 acre lots, and most people in the neighborhood assumed that, and only a few people got the application of the hearing. So once that the news of these tracts only being half acre to 3/4 acre kind of got the interest of the neighborhood. I'm a builder, so a lot of people came and asked, hey, nobody was opposed to the addition, just that the size lots was a concern, one, because of aerobic systems, and two, the conformity of the neighborhoods in the area. There are no neighborhoods that are not on city septic under 1 acre anywhere within 10-mile radius. And so then people were concerned about conformity of price per square foot, the larger the lot, the bigger the home, and they had expressed concern, and I said, well, this is just a preliminary plat application. I'm sure that once people are concerned that the council would understand that there would probably be a justification for them to move it to a 1 acre tract instead of half acres because of the conformity of the other neighborhoods.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, you talk about conformity.
Yeah.
Could you articulate why conformity is important?
Well, if you'll look at the addition to the northeast, those are in Oakdale Meadows, and all of those houses are over 3,000 square foot. Most of the neighborhoods along the southern part of Oakdale Valley, they're all over 3,000 square foot homes. If you put a house on a half-acre tract, the max, roughly, depending on how the driveway and all of that fits in there, they're going to be 2,500 square foot homes, which are smaller homes than what is in the existing. But more
How
than
does that
that,
negatively affect?
how does that negatively affect? Because you have larger homes, larger lots. Well, when you have a larger lot, it costs more. So therefore, you're going to put a larger home, which affects the price per value. Some of the other items that they were concerned about was there was no mention of if it was going to be a gated community, if it was going to have curb and gutter, for the drainage, since they're smaller lots. We figured if they were 1 acre, they wouldn't have to because of the absorption rate. But there's no mention of, the parameter of the subdivision, and so they just wanted clarification, and that was mainly why I was here.
Sorry to keep asking on this, does it bring down the existing home values? Is that the concern?
Yeah,
Or is the
if you
concern-
have a neighborhood where you're selling $1 million houses, and then you have houses that are 2,500 square feet, there are 300,000, there's a big difference between a $300,000 house and a $600,000, $700,000 to $1 million house.
But per square foot, they could be the same.
Not typically. If you'll look, the price per square foot on a smaller home generally is a little bit more, a little less per square foot than you would get for a larger home.
Actually, I'm sorry, this isn't
Oh,
a
no
issue,
worries.
but typically we see dollar per square foot being higher on a smaller home because you've got more concentration of expensive square footage, right? Kitchens and bathrooms.
No. Think about this. If you have a lot that is half acre, you ask $40,000. If you have a lot that's 1 acre, it's $80,000. So right off the bat, you're doubling the value of the cost of the home just in the lot cost.
Well, I'd be interested to talk further about this. I'm not going to burden this this venue with this, but either way, I, as a commissioner, don't take into account property values.
Right.
My decisions. It's about compatibility from a use standpoint and from the character of the development. To me, personally, I don't see an issue with this. I actually do support it. So,
Mr. Johnson, give us the 25 words or less about the bringing sewer, why that didn't work out. Well,
that all?
Is it the way the land falls?
Right, we would have to go from the low. So, for example, the northwest corner of our property is very high. In order to get to the sewer, which is over a ridge, we would have to cut through the ridge very deeply. So in order to get there, we would have to come up the creek, which is down where you see our Arrowhead CA there, the common area, and come through that neighbor's property through an easement. The easement was some 1,800 feet long to get there, and we worked with city staff as well as that property owner for a year and couldn't get it done. I think the adverse result of that is we would have been asking for denser homes. To respond, and what I did tell the neighborhood association president on the telephone is I did explain that we would be having curb and gutter streets. We are 30,000 square feet. We don't have any lots less than 30,000 square feet, and we have several that are greater than that. And we're bringing in public water. So for another example, the lots immediately north of us are much smaller than what we're proposing because they're on sewer.
I was going to ask about that. These do look at least as large as the ones to the north.
Yeah, so the ones to the northeast that he was talking about, that was platted probably before sewer was extended, and it may have been before water was available up there. I know, and I remember when we did the estates at Apple Valley on the east side of Air Depot, we extended water through that addition, but they're 30,000 square foot lots on aerobic and septic systems. So it's in keeping with what's over there.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any other questions, concerns? Is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this item today? Any other thoughts? We'll need a separate vote on the variance if we're so inclined.
Well, I move to approve the variance to item number 8, section, the variance to section 5.3.1D5 of the subdivision regulations for item number 8.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the variance to item number 8. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
I move the approval of item number 8, subject to the technical evaluations.
Second.
Which include no street sub to the east.
Yes.
I have a motion and a second. Cast your votes, please.
Thank
It is
you.
approved.
Item 9, PC 10566, application to rezone 2515 Northwest 1st Street from R1 Single Family to I2 Moderate Industrial.
Could you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Jimmy Smith. The addresses we own under our company name, Triquetra LLC, are 2523 and 2527. 2515 has actually been my home since I grew up in that home. I grew up in this neighborhood. The address in the middle, 2519, is my lifelong friend, Rosalie Morris, U.S. attorney. And we decided to get ahead of the game and rezone these light industrial. I do intend to clear the lots on 2523 and 2527 and put a small warehouse on it, similar to the one next to it, and either use it as investment property or run one of my operations out of it. I haven't decided yet which way I'm going to go.
Your staff is recommending that the application be amended to I-1. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
And you understand what that change would mean for the use of the property, right?
I do. My parents will be able to live out their days in their home, to my knowledge, as long as it doesn't go vacant for more than 2 years based on my reading of the law or the guidelines.
Yeah, I just want to be sure you're comfortable that you understand the difference between I-2 and I-1.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioners, do you have any questions of the applicant? Is there anybody else here who wants to be heard on this item today? I'll take a motion, I'm sorry.
I make a motion to recommend approval of case number PC 10566 to City Council. Second.
Great.
The
Thank you.
motion is second to approve. Item number 9, would you cast your votes, please?
Amending to I-1.
Yes, amending to I-1.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Item 10 was deferred to March 14th. Item 11, SPUD 1105, application to rezone 3617 Southwest 44th Street from C3 Commercial to a SPUD.
Hello, my name is Jeremy Shabbatz, and I'm representing myself and my business partners, and we would like to rezone this. We want to turn this into a body shop. It's an existing structure that's been empty for years and years, and we want to bring some commerce to this dead area and more taxes.
As I was reading through this application, I had some concern
Yes, ma'am.
about one sort of variation on your uses, which is the sale of mobile homes and recreational vehicles. I understand that your intended use for the property does not include that. Would it be all right with you if we amend or limit use unit 8300.20, automotive and equipment sales, rentals, manufactured homes and recreational vehicles, to limit that to truck rentals?
Truck rentals, what about sales like for, because the body shop oftentimes will buy vehicles at salvage yards and basically put them back together and then resell them. We don't want to lose the opportunity to be able to sell our cars that, we may fix or maybe somebody doesn't pay their bill. We need to sell a car that's been repoed.
Talking about large trucks or just pickups?
Just Penske's. We're just going to basically rent Penske's out, as one type of income for our business.
Maybe selling some of those?
I'm sorry, sir?
Selling some of those as well?
No, sir, just rental on the Penske. And the main reason why we had so many items, that we wanted to rezone it for is because the property around it, the acre and a half that we had rezoned last year, we can't use it. We bought an acre and a half, and we want to develop this land in the same area to bring new commerce and hopefully, more people to the area that would spend more tax money and so forth, so on. But we can't develop the land because the water main that's ran right through the property on the edge is blocking us from, running our sewer line. So we're in the same boat, and this, we kind of feel misled a little bit by the realtors and such because, it wasn't disclosed to us or anything about the sewer line or about the water main. I mean, in parts, the water main's at 2 feet, right in the ditch. Other parts, it's about 5 feet, so there's no way to get above it or below it. So what we want to do is make sure that we wanted to rezone this for auto body repairs. What is our main goal? We also own a roofing and construction company, so from time to time we may do roofing and construction sales out of it. So that's why we put that on there. But as far as selling cars, we don't want to, we're not looking to open up a huge car dealership or nothing. It's for mainly, I would say we'd have, I really don't want to put a number on it, but maybe 10 tops, if that's the case, vehicles that we might have for sale from time to time.
Yeah. The problem is the way the code works. If the zoning is present, then whether that's the use that you make of it or someone who purchases the property in the future, it has the zoning, it needs to be car lot or a recreational vehicle or mobile home.
The recreational
sales.
vehicle mobile home sales, it's already, from what I understand, it's already zoned that, I believe. Or it's, what's the C3 uses? I'm sorry, the property that we purchased, the acre and a half, was zoned for recreation storage is what it was. So that's why we had to rezone it for what we wanted it for, but then, we can't use it. So until we figure the sewage system out, and I heard your conversation with the last gentleman and had a little bit of positivity to my thought process because maybe there's a solution to our problem. We went to the city and it's around $150,000 to $200,000 to redo the infrastructure for the city, and it's a huge burden on a small company that we have. I mean, we're not millionaires or anything like that. We're just making a living, and we saved all our money up to buy this land, and then now we can't use it because of the water main. So we're in a pickle. Something that we thought we might discuss in the future with you guys. Hopefully we can figure out something. After listening to the last case, I thought maybe there's some solution. But anyway, back to the original SPUD. We don't plan to sell RVs at all. Zero. We don't plan on working on RVs.
If you don't have any interest in mobile homes or RVs, we can eliminate that and leave the truck
Yes.
sales and rental.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So,
We're proposing to alter the language to 8300.20 from how it's stated now, limited solely to truck sales and rentals. And you're comfortable with that language, JJ?
Well, trucks, would that be, I mean, cars wouldn't be included? Or,
it's a separate use unit.
Yeah.
So, but this could not be a car lot, right, without a special permit? Is that right? Yes. It could. I'm just not comfortable with that. I really am not.
could you limit to the amount of cars we can sell? I'm okay with that,
Could we
too.
not make it ancillary to another use to allow that? Is there a way to do that, JJ? And what is the way, what is the right way for us to articulate that? If we make it, what is your primary business?
Primary objective is to turn it into a body shop. Right now, it's at Southwest Automotive Center. We purchased the structure and all the equipment inside the structure, so we have everything that we need other than a spray foam booth to have a fully up and running body shop.
Okay.
And that's our goal.
Is that use, what is that use unit for body shops?
It's the last one.
That's 8300.15?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
But we might have a car from time to time that we have to sell. That's the only kicker is that.
Understood. I'm trying to help you.
Sir.
Let me finish.
Yes, sir.
Is that use unit uncomfortable? Is there anybody who's uncomfortable with that use unit in this area in terms of the auto body?
No.
So would it be possible?
Or even the rental, I'm perfectly okay with that.
Okay.
I don't want to see it turn into a car lot. I don't want to see it turn into a mobile home sales
Got it.
or recreational vehicle sales lot.
Could we make auto and truck sales ancillary to the use
Make
unit
it
8300.15?
Accessory to another permitted use on the site.
So we could make auto sales, truck sales, and leasing only ancillary to the use of 8300.15 automotive and equipment, which would allow your business to do it, but it would require us to strike 8300.18 and 8300.20. Your business can use it, but it satisfies the concern that an auto dealer could come in behind you, because to our chairperson's point, it's not you we're necessarily worried about, right? It's the guy two people from now who's got 40 cars piled up out there.
Right.
Okay.
I understand.
Yeah, but he needs the 83.20
Yes, I do.
to do the rental.
To do the rental?
Yeah,
So
he
it would just be
needs
8300.18 that we have to strike.
So,
Right.
Are we striking it, or are we making it limited to an accessory?
We'll make 18 accessory to another permitted use on the site, which is the auto sales.
To the auto.
And then
we
we'll
would just have to
strike the
come back to
mobile
the committee.
home
Yeah.
and RV from the other one to allow the truck rental.
All
From
right.
20.
Okay.
All right. I think I got this piece of it. If there's other discussion.
Is there anybody else here who wants to be heard on this item today? Commissioners, do you have any other thoughts? If not, I'll
This
take
is
a
a
motion.
very blighted area. I'm glad you guys are moving.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah.
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 It's good.
I'm glad you're going to run a business here and hopefully be a great stakeholder here. And
Thank you.
so
We appreciate that.
Will you adopt the vacant lot across the street and keep it clean and mow it and all that?
Yeah, that'd be
Yes, it's, even though we own the land next to it, we still have to mow it, so it's, and that area is actually an up-and-coming area with Amazon down the road. It's starting to, I think it's going to increase in value, and
North Edge Lariat Landing.
and I hate to go back to the other deal, but is there any suggestions you guys might have for us as far as like developing our land that we purchased? We're not trying to do anything. What we were trying to do is build our corporate office for our roofing and construction company. That was our main goal, and because we were leasing a building for like $4,000 a month, and so we purchased the land and figured, hey, we'll just build our own, and save money, and then we'll own it.
Are you talking about the utilities issue?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Unfortunately, I mean, that's a due diligence thing that
Yeah.
potential buyers should
I understand.
have you talked to
figure
an
out
engineer? Have you talked to an engineer?
Yeah,
about
we
it?
talked to Crafton and Toll, I believe they're here today. And we had them, basically, they handled everything for us, and we handled it through the utilities department. And from what the gentleman we were speaking to, he said that what his suggestion would be for us to completely redo the infrastructure that the city laid. So he wants us to dig up the water main,
reconfigure the water main. He wants us to basically backfill it. He wants us to redo the entire storm drain system. And this is just, from what we understand from talking to contractors, it's a $150,000, $200,000 project. And for a small company like us,
I work with developers professionally all the time that run into the same issue. Unfortunately, the city's not in the business of using taxpayer money to help out a single entity.
And I understand that 100%, and I'm not asking for any help.
I think it's exploring, get a second opinion with another engineer, and try to figure out if there's a way. But
we were really just kind of hoping for something like a robust system for one building in the middle of a field that we own, and it's for that area, there's nothing there. It's been an empty field as far as I can remember. I grew up here, and there's been nothing there. So it's something that would bring money and new commerce, and probably bring crime down a little bit, because you have lights and buildings and businesses and such. But I know we're not here for that reason.
You know what? Call this guy right here.
Okay.
J.J. Chambliss, and we'll see if there is some mechanism through which we can forward your concerns here a little bit.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much,
See
ma'am.
if we can shepherd you a little bit.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure. In the meantime,
If there's no more discussion, I'll take a crack at a motion. I'll make a motion to recommend approval on SPUD 1105, amending the allowed use units to provide 8300.14, 8300.15, and 8300.18 as an ancillary component of 8300.15. Saying that correctly, JJ? Accessory, thank you. And 8300.20, amending to allow only for truck sales and rental.
I got a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 11, amended as read. Would you cast your votes, please?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Good luck.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much, sir.
And good luck.
Item 12 is SP 519, application for special permit to operating a drinking establishment at 2829 West California.
Hello, George Mendros, 5800 North Porter Avenue, representing the applicant. And to begin, I'm here again. We spoke last time, and you asked me to bring some information about getting the certificate of compliance allowed for the license and so forth. We brought in a lease agreement that you should all have in front of you. And within that lease agreement, it shows that the landlord did have in the lease agreement that the tenant was to maintain their certification and licenses. It's on item 3, page 2, the very top. And
I'm sorry. Are we talking about the same thing?
I believe so.
My staff report shows this is a new application. We're talking about item number 12, SP.
Oh, I thought you said number 11. I'm sorry. My mistake. My mistake.
We just did 11. Maybe we'll come back to you. I'm not sure what it is that you're here to talk to us about. But right now, we're going to talk about item number 12, SP 519, application for special permit to operate a drinking establishment in the I-1. That is us? Okay, come forward. You're in the right place.
Well, okay, let's rewind, start over. Okay, so are we on board now? Did you have the item?
I don't remember us discussing this ever before or asking you for any information.
This was the last, it was 2 meetings ago previous, and it would pertain about not having a liquor license. Here, we had the county and we had the state license, but we didn't have the city license. And we came in to do a certificate of compliance, and that's what caused all this with the Able Commission.
I'm sorry, am I going senile? Does anybody remember this?
He initially went to the Board of Adjustment for a
thank you.
variance to the cessation of a non-conforming use.
Okay.
The board felt, couldn't come to a consensus and felt that it would be better served to rezone the site, get in conformance with the zoning.
So it is the first time here.
First time here.
Thank
Not the
you.
first time in this room. He's been in this room.
Okay. I'm feeling better.
We should have all talked beforehand and agreed that we were going to tell Janice we all remembered it.
It was bad enough about the street stub to the east, so, okay, great. Now, we're all on the same page.
Okay.
And we're going to just assume that you've got all the licensing you need, because otherwise, we can't help you. My concern, my one and only concern about this, my biggest concern, I'll say, about this, really has to do with the residential property to the east. There's a 25-foot open space, but is there any kind of fence or physical barrier between you and them?
There is on the back side.
Okay. So,
If you can, let's see, looking at that, there's that whole back side, there is a fence that borders the entire rear, so. There's a car lot right next to it to the north.
is it site-proof? Is it like a stockade fence?
I believe so. I believe so.
Let's start this way.
There we go. There's a photo of the back of it.
Yeah. Let's stipulate, shall we, that there will be one if there's
Yes.
not already?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. I think it's within our purview to require that as part of the special permit, so. And the other thing I just would, again, there was this discussion about hours of operation, even though our general standards tell us that we have the ability to limit the hours of operation. That is not, in fact, true anymore. If we do special permits for alcohol-related uses, they are governed by state law. So, just to be aware.
Okay.
I really think, unfortunately, that makes it a little bit harder for people who are coming before us on these things, because with respect to especially locations near residential uses, it makes it a little bit harder for us to approve them when we don't have the ability to control their hours of operation, unfortunately. But be it as it may, do any of the other commissioners have any questions or comments for the applicant?
You're aware of the technical evaluation, which requires you to maintain the existing greenbelt too, in addition to the fence that Commissioner Powers is requiring. You're okay with that as well? Okay.
Is there anybody else present here who wishes to be heard today? If not, I'll take a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, did you?
Actually, I'm the owner of the property, and he's architect, engineer, he drew that contract, so I was trying to help, he's asking the fence, yes, there is a fence, and this established has been there last 60 years. It's not we are doing it, but last time my tenant, he didn't get the city license, I don't know why, but that's the reason they are holding up. And I had a tenant last time, and he terminated the lease because of the city didn't issue the permit, because the new law changed ABC. So the last tenant, they had the beer license, which is 3.2 alcohol. So now the new one came. So when the tenant went to the city, they stopped it. They said, no, we have to have a new application for the zoning, to selling the drinking facilities. And drinking facilities, same location, is last 60 years.
Thank you. Commissioners?
I don't want to keep going on this fence thing, but as far as I can see, there's only a chain link fence there.
They've agreed to.
I know. I just want to make sure that you guys understand if there is another fence that I didn't see, that this will require you to install it.
Okay, we'll do that.
You're okay with that? All right.
No problem.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'll take a motion.
Okay. I move to recommend approval on item SP 519 with the potential depending on the fencing on site, that they will add a site-proof fence between themselves and the residential to the east. Make that recommendation to City Council. That make sense?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 12 with the understanding that there will, in fact, be a site-proof fence between them and the property to the east. Cast your votes, please. It's approved.
Thank you.
Item 13, SPUD 1106, application by Plaza District Properties to rezone 1629 Northwest 16th Street.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Here on behalf of the applicant, with me is your expert that you heard from earlier about state alcohol laws, as well as Josh Ivey, who is the intended operator of this facility. So this is a SPUD application that is largely similar to one that came through a couple years ago before the Planning Commission, ultimately City Council. If you'll remember then, there was some people here that were protesting, so some certain modifications were made to the SPUD that we're going to talk about. But I want to focus first on why we're here. We've added the ability to have the arcade use unit. The operator runs what's called the up-down arcade bar. It's fairly cool idea that frankly fits in perfectly with the Plaza District. It is a retro 80s and 90s themed arcade. All of the games within the facility are 80s and 90s themed. And if you look through here, they have been in operation in Des Moines, Kansas City, Minneapolis, and Milwaukee, as well as St. Louis. And so you can look through and see some of the things that they offer. They do offer both bar and food service as well. The reason that we have the drinking establishment use unit in the SPUD is because Steve tells me we're going to need it for some ABLE issues. And so staff's recommendation through TE, I believe it's number 1, is that we make it an accessory use unit. We agree to that. That's not a problem whatsoever. So we can make that an accessory, specifically accessory to the arcade, but accessory to any use contained within the SPUD. So we agree with TEs 1, 2, and 4. TE3 is what I want to focus on. TE3 was at the specific request of the then Planning Commission member in Ward 6 because of the presence of one particular protester. If you look at the Plaza District, there are no other businesses within the entirety of the district that have any restriction on hours of operation. In fact, if you look at Saints, which is a pub which is I think it's 75 yards immediately to our west on the other side of Blackwelder. When you go to their website, they are open till 2 a.m. So it's not uncommon in this area for the restaurants/bars to be open to that time frame. And so we would just simply ask that we are permitted to be able to operate in a similar manner as all of the other businesses. At the time, it was thought that perhaps this building was somehow different. My client, frankly, against my advice, because they wanted to get it approved, agreed to the limitation on hours, and much like I told them and told this commission then, I think that's going to be approved to be a problem with prospective tenants. If you think about trying to promote your building when you're the only building in the entire district that has limitations on hours, it makes it problematic. Case in point, we're here today. So we would ask for approval, again, deleting TE3. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Again, the operator is here. The information is before you, but if you have any specific questions. And there is no protest.
I have a couple of questions, one of which is for staff. I don't quite understand TE2 and what its purpose is, and what are we, what will become of the landscaping? Are we just going to leave it to chance and administrative amendment in the future, or why are we removing it?
The SPUD document requires that they meet the city's landscape ordinance. This, the drawing that they've submitted, I think falls short of that. So we're just saying omit that, and it will be determined through the building permit process that it meets the landscape code.
Can you meet the landscape code?
I believe so.
So we're not going to seek administrative amendment to reduce it at some point? That's my concern.
No, we couldn't. We'd have to go to the Board of Adjustment. But I don't anticipate that either.
I know where you live. Okay. are we really only adding a single?
Two. We're adding two uses.
Okay.
We're adding the arcade use, and we're adding the drinking use. However, we're making that accessory to the uses in the SPUD, so...
Just to be clear, that's 8300.55. Would you keep calling the arcade use? Is that what that is? Participant recreation indoor? Is that what that is?
Yes. Participant recreation and entertainment indoor.
And so you're saying TE number 1 is accessory use to that use unit?
Yeah. I mean, the way staff got it worded is SPUD must specify the drinking establishment use accessory to a permitted use in the SPUD, but we're fine with it being to the arcade use as well.
I have this whole big speech about, more is not always better, and, revitalization is not the same thing as unbridled expansion. I actually think that probably in this case I'll wait and give that speech another time. I'm a little uncomfortable with the drinking establishment, but I think as long as it's tied as an accessory use to the arcade, I don't see that the arcade really makes this development any better or worse, forgive me, than it is otherwise, so, given the location. I have a little concern about the Plaza District, frankly. It's kind of spilling out of its boundaries, but we'll leave that discussion for another time.
Well, I would say that we are getting potentially the best local hipster spot, as well as the best place for a guy's night out. So there.
Those are two key points.
Key points.
What was the first one? I didn't hear the first one. What was?
Best local hipster spot.
Oh, okay.
The parking
ASA.
also is an issue for me.
ASA.
Not my words.
The parking also is an issue. I mean, five spaces. Is it 4 or 5? I can't quite tell from the drawing. Is not doing much for this area, and
So there has
help.
Sure. So yeah, I mean it's kind of what the plaza has become. However, there has been some recent modifications to that with a vacation action that we did right there on Blackwelder that has provided some parking, and then there's a parking lot. I think it's just east and south of there as well that's offers some relief.
Okay.
Parking is a challenge. It's going to be down there.
Is there anybody else here who wishes to be heard on this item today?
People should just stop driving.
There it is.
We add that as a TE.
Yeah.
If you drive a
It's a
car here, you
high-speed
can't
TE.
come to this. Yeah.
He's going to frequent this place as a hipster, and he's going to ride his bike to
Commissioners.
further commit that.
Do you own stock in Uber?
If there's no more discussion, I'll make a motion to recommend approval of SPUD 1106, amending TE number 1 to specify that the drinking establishment use is accessory to the use unit 8300.55.
And deleting TE3.
And deleting TE number 3, sorry, yeah.
Second. So before we actually call that vote, with respect to TE number 3, it's not any different than the rest of the discussions we've been having about this, is it? I mean, is it?
Arguably, this is a SPUD, which is a negotiated item. So, I mean, you can make that argument maybe, but, I mean, I'd be careful, I guess.
Okay, we'll leave that for another time, too. I frankly, given our limited track record on enforceability, I question the value of us trying to do that, but I'm not going to say never, so let's just call the vote. I have a motion and a second to approve item number 13, deleting TE 3 and tying the drinking establishment use unit to the arcade. Cast your votes, please. It's approved.
Thank you.
Item 14 is PUD 1711, application by Cosmo Properties to rezone 10901 North Midwest Boulevard. Madam Chairman, members of the Commission, Brian Kuhn, representing the applicant, Cosmo Energy. This is, to me, I've been very blessed and very lucky to get to work on some pretty neat projects here in Oklahoma City. To me, this is very unique. Our client, Ben Barisi, bought this 40 acres. He lives in the neighborhood just to the west, about, probably a quarter mile, half a mile, in the lakeside at Oakdale. It's just off the screen to the left there. What he is trying to create is what we've called a retreat. He hired Rand Elliott to do the architecture on these buildings. And so what he's trying to do is build an office for his own use, as well as a place for his kids to play, as well as a place for his employees to have a place to not only work, but also to be able to maybe have picnics or whatever. The western side of the property, as you can see on this aerial photo, and let me pass these out before I get going too far. You can see on the aerial that I gave you, as well as on here, as well as on the screen, the area to the west has been cleared. This area was in a pretty major fire probably 4 or 5 years ago that burned a lot of the trees. And so when he acquired the property, he has removed the dead trees, and you can see that's the areas that have been cleared. You can still see the areas where those dead trees, a lot of the dead trees are still piled. On that western part, in the far northwest corner of the property will be his in-laws' house. He's going to build their house there, or they're going to build there. They also raise horses, so they're going to build an arena as well as a show barn for their horses, but not for public use. It's just for their own private use. And then there's currently a pond on the property that is on the northern side of the kind of north-central part of this property that we want to rework and have the buildings situated around that pond. I want to just address a couple things, but first of all, I think just it's important to know this guy lives in the area. It's going to be for his offices, it's going to be for his family, and for his employees only. A couple things I do want to point out. I'm not going to go through all these papers, so don't worry, but the concept in the PUD talks about it's a venue for family and employees. It's not for public use. It's for private camping areas, so if his kids want to go out there and camp at night, he wants them to be able to do that. Private garden areas. And also, I wish I had put that word in many, many times, private, it talks about soccer and baseball fields. It's going to be for his kids or the employees to have a soccer game on the weekend maybe, or a softball game to go out there and play. They will not be lit. It's not going to be something that other teams can come and use as their practice fields. It's only for family and employees' use. And I know that you've probably seen a copy of a protest letter that talks about one of these will be an operation, a rodeo grounds. We don't want a rodeo grounds. It's a private arena for their own horses. So nothing's going to be lit. There's not going to be bleachers at any of these fields. We don't even show fields. We don't even have, actually, you also gave you, and I've got it on this board, but you also have in front of you a topo map. We've already done the topo of the area. There's nowhere out there that's flat. So there's nowhere where we could really have a organized softball game. It'd be something, again, on a Saturday, the employees may just say, let's have a picnic and do that and play out there. So, yes.
I apologize to interrupt you. Just so, I'll remember my point, I just wanted to go ahead and ask it. Are we required in a spud like this to define private uses? I mean, who's stopping them from camping if they want to camp?
Well, and I want to back up too. Originally, we had an O2R1 PUD, okay? And then we met with staff, we met with engineering, which I'll talk about too. They said, you know what, those uses are allowed in AA. This private arena, the house, all that is already allowed. So we took R1 out. We kept it just AA with some additional uses to allow the offices. So, yeah, they're allowed now. I was just trying to put in here his vision of what he wants to do on this property.
So for clarity, we don't even need that language at all because it's already permitted in AA. I guess that's to Commissioner Highsmith's point.
Yeah, I think the uses he just described, we just consider as accessory or ancillary, and they're not organized. They're just, family and employees. So it's really not necessary.
I think there's a
He's just trying to be
value to
careful.
them.
Yeah.
They may not be necessary, but to the extent that they offer any reassurance to the surrounding property owners, I think they have that value.
But it seems like in this case, they might be doing the opposite. They might be worrying the surrounding people, because they're like, well, how is that defined? Are they going to have RV campers and all kinds of stuff? At least that's what the letter says. And so it almost seems to me that in this case, in order to alleviate that concern, it's pretty simple. We just strike the things that are permitted anyway, so that it's not a semantics issue.
Exactly. And all I was trying to do, and we met with staff, and they were very open with us of what we want to do, and I was trying to be open. Here's what we want to do out there. It's a family retreat type thing. His in-laws are going to live there. So anyway, then on the staff report, just a couple of comments that I would like to address. And one of these, on page 2, this is an AAPUD. It's not O2, which originally it was, so I just wanted to just verify that. And then on page 3, it just talks about the additional uses that we want to do. Again, professional offices, a community garden for his employees to have a community garden. I think you saw a community garden come through not too long ago, Northeast Oklahoma City. Culture exhibits. He wants to, in the building that's located down here, he wants to have an iron working shop for himself. And so he may do some artwork, but it's not going to be open for public use. Murals, I'm not sure why that was in there, but they wanted to keep it in. Rainwater harvesting, which has to have a use unit, and live work units, because he's going to have that workshop and an exhibit place for his artwork that he wants to do. A couple things on our signage. We're only going to have 2 signs, monument signs, out on Hefner or Midwest Boulevard to tell people how to get to the offices. There won't be any for the arena, any of that, so that will be, I want to make sure to talk about that. Now, one of the things that's in the TEs, there are 2 TEs that I agree with all of them, but there's 2. One of them is the 55-foot height, and I'm going to have Rand Elliott talk about that in a minute, and talk about our desire for what we want to do with the buildings. The other one is a new comment that came through planning, wasn't agreed to by stormwater, but it came through planning, and it's talking about any stream bed keep 100 feet away from it, any stream. Well, why I did the topo on here, and it's hard to see, but that's why I gave you the small copy. There's a pipe that comes underneath Hefner Road right here. There is no stream bed on any of this property. So there's a pond that's not even associated with the low area. This is also what we call a blue line stream on the USGS map. There is no creek. This is just a hollowed out bowl here. The water comes through here and it just spreads out, but it goes around the pond. So I don't want to commit to saying I'll stay 100 feet away from a stream bed that doesn't even exist. So, but in your staff report, I will agree, and it talks about that any 100-year flood zone, I have to make it in a common area. I'm fine with that. I'm never going to build in a 100-year flood zone. So that will not happen, but I wanted to point that out in the staff report. They do talk about that.
So what is it you want us to do with TE?
I want to just strike that TE. Because we can't, there is no stream bed for me to stay 100 feet away from on both sides. So I'd like to strike that TE.
Well, if there's no stream bed, then what are you worried about?
Well, because what we're going to do, I may redo this pond, or I know I'm going to redo the pond. There's a rectangular pond. We want all of our buildings to concentrate around this pond and have all the employees have visibility and be able to walk around. So I may create, once I get to maybe this point, I may create a stream to feed this pond and go on. This pond, and as well as the properties to the north of this, there's huge springs out here. This pond has water in it. I don't know how to get water, it's surrounded by water. There's got to be some kind of spring system that feeds it. But I'll probably, in what we end up doing here, I'll probably create a stream that goes to here, so we'll recircle water back to it. And that once it gets a dry bed, there's not water coming through here all the time. I want to be able to use that as a water feature, the stream, what I'm calling a stream. So, but every place has a 100-year flood zone. If we get 100-year storm, places flood, it may not be able to flood back. But I'm going to study that to make sure if there's enough water coming through to create a 100-year flood zone, I'll stay out there. And that's what the staff report talks about, is that I have to do that. So I'd like to strike that TE, but again, on the other T that I want to talk about, I'm going to have Rand come up and talk about the height and why we'd like to stick with that 55 feet. On page 11 of the staff report.
Before we leave this point.
Okay.
So are we really wanting to substitute a TE for 3, something about the 100-year floodplain?
That would be fine. It's just, it's in the stormwater comments in the staff report, that you cannot build in a 100-year flood zone. The thing is, sometimes these staff reports are pretty much boiler language. So that's what that is. But I want to assure you that I'm not going to build a building in a 100-year flood zone. And that's why I'm just saying, if you want to substitute that language, that's fine. But I can't agree with the 100 foot on either side of something that exists.
Okay. We like that idea. We want to substitute it.
Just for clarification.
That's fine.
Because with no stream bank there, and maybe I should ask Curtis, since it looks like he did the review of this one, I wanted to make sure that this wasn't more about the riparian corridor. It claims to have riparian areas on the site, and, you know.
Like I said, this pond isn't, there's no off-site water gets to this pond. How it has water in it, I have no idea. Seriously, it's surrounded by a berm, all four sides. So there is, riparian talks about, it deals with rivers and creeks and that. There's no creek here. As you can see on that, and I know you know, just from what you do, you can look at those contours and tell there's no defined stream. So there's no defined riparian anything. There's a very small drainage area that drains onto this property. So I think it's just a new language we're going to start seeing a lot of.
I'm not an ecologist, though, so whenever something's defined as riparian or not, I'm like, okay, I trust whatever they say. I don't know what defines that.
Well, riparian rights talks about if the Oklahoma River changes its course, you get your rights to that wherever it is. I mean, there's nothing there. I mean, I was surprised when I went out there because I saw a blue line on the USGS map. There is no stream. So we can substitute that language. I'm fine with that. That just says we will not build in a 100-year flood zone. I mean, I'm not going to design it. They wouldn't allow it. So can I move? You ready to move on from that point?
Thank you.
Page 11 of the staff report. Again, I think this is a lot of boilerplate language. When we met with planning staff, Christopher DeVolder came up and met with us also. There is no sewer in this area. It's a long way to a 96-inch interceptor line that's, I think, maybe several miles east of this. So there won't be sewer and water for this area probably ever. So we're going to do, it'll be septic, aerobic fields as well as water wells for these 6 buildings and for the home. So anyway, this talks about in the staff report, I just want to address that they talk about that we have to do this, extend this gravity main. There's nowhere to extend it to because we're beyond that basin. Same thing on the water availability. There is no water lines out here. So we'll have water wells, and we've tested that. We have good water for that. So again, those are not part of TEs. I just want to address them because I think you're going to hear more about them here in a little bit. And I'll speed it up here. I've already addressed that. Again, the TEs, number 3, if you want to substitute that language, that's fine. Item number 6, the maximum building height of 55 feet. We'd like to keep with that. Again, I think just the main thing is this is a small office for his business, Cosmo Energy, the office out near Quail Springs Office Park now. And he is just wanting to create something for his employees to be among the trees. And I think I'd like, if it's possible, I'd like to have Rand Elliott come up and just talk about some of his ideas of what the buildings are going to look like. To me, it's very unique. And yes, this is not an urban area. There's no doubt. But if we did, let's say we did do this as a rural subdivision, you'd see what you just saw about 3 items ago on Britton Road. 30,000 square foot lots, which I don't think is really something that I don't think the neighbors would like to see. They do. I don't think any of our other neighbors, surrounding neighbors, have any problem with this. A friend of mine just bought the 160 acres to the north. He's making it a family retreat. It's a home. And this is just, he has no problem with this at all. So anyway, I'd like to have Rand come up and just talk to you about his ideas of the buildings, because I think it's important what's going to be built here. It's not going to be your 3-story glass and chrome, buildings, office buildings. It's going to be something very unique. So.
Before we do that, one piece of this I'm struggling with a little bit is it's not being platted, it's not being, you're not doing specific plans.
Right.
So in terms of, the placement of these buildings, and although I'm dying to hear what Rand has to say about what he's planning to create out there, there's no after the fact, it's like after we turn you loose here today, there's no guarantee that that's what gets built. I'm struggling a little bit with how we make sure that what we're talking about here today is what actually happens.
Okay, there's a note in the PUD, because we have to talk about that buildings have to have frontage on a public street to get building permits. Well, here, we're not going to plat, we're not going to have public streets, they're all private. We even have in here that we're going to use pervious surface for our driveways and our sidewalks, which could be crushed granite, be all sorts of, so you're not going to see much concrete out here as far as on the ground or asphalt. It's going to be some natural materials for our driveways. That's why that note is in there for that. So if someone came in years from now and said, you know what, we want to buy this and split those lots off and sell them, they won't be able to because there won't be any streets to them. And the city would never accept a graveled, or not graveled, but the crushed granite type of street or the pervious surfaces. So I think they would have to come back before you if they ever wanted to sell these as one at a time. That's not his goal at all. He's a very young man. He's in his low 30s. He plans on being here a long time, and I just think it's an exciting project for this part, anywhere in Oklahoma, to have a family and employee-only retreat. 40 acres for 6 buildings is a lot of land, so.
Good afternoon. Rand Elliott. I live at 425 Northwest 15th Street. Ben told me to tell you that you were all invited to Thanksgiving dinner there at the workshop. It was supposed to be funny. The only one that smiled was JJ, so thank you for that. What I've handed out is just a couple of copies from my sketchbook, and I'm happy to pass this around if you'd like to see the originals. This is one of the most interesting opportunities that have come across my desk in a long, long time. And it's an opportunity to work with someone who wants to do a really beautiful setting for his family and for his employees. And my gesture about Thanksgiving, the workshop building, which is on the lower right, is his art space. And the idea is that that would be a place big enough to have Thanksgiving dinner for 30 people. And so that's really an aspiration of his. The small office spaces, 5,000 square feet is basically the size of a house these days. And so they're very small buildings intended to nestle into the landscape is really the whole point. The fact that there'll be horses on the west side of the site and family property there just makes it a very idyllic kind of an arrangement. So that's the setting for what we're doing. And what you're seeing there, just as a point of reference, these are early sketches, obviously, working to imagine what the spirit of this site might be architecturally. And so the drawing on top, what these are sections or elevations looking at the front of it. And what you see, I hope, in spirit is the idea that it looks like a series of trees coming together. And the idea with these is that this might be a structure that is made from steel that would rust or something like that and would have forms that would be similar to the trees in which the buildings are going to nest, if you will. And so that's what you're seeing. You're actually seeing the little people down inside the buildings themselves. The shapes that it could take certainly are varied in terms of how it might work. But the idea is that this fits into this site. It's not intended to be something that is foreign to the site, but something integral to the site. You can see my note at the top. I was working on this on November the 6th of last year, and I wrote the word epiphany, and it was just one of those moments I was on the site and realized that the buildings could actually feel like the trees, and so that's what this intention is. The second drawing is another approach. One of the things that he's talking about, since he's in the oil and gas business, is that wouldn't it be great if the geology building felt like geology? And so if you look at the right-hand side, this sort of conical element, the whole idea inspirationally would be that the buildings might feel like geology. They might feel like big stones or something like that coming together. So it fits the landscape because there are loose boulders and that sort of thing on this landscape, and that the building might be integral to that as well. So it gives you a little bit of an idea about the spirit of the project and the person who wants to build this amazing retreat for his family and his coworkers. So I'm happy to answer questions in whatever detail you'd like.
I'm sorry, what size did you say the buildings would be?
We're talking about in the 5,000 square foot size.
Is that something that we're willing to commit to?
I'm sorry?
I said, is that something that we're willing to commit to?
Yes, and I think the way it's written, okay, Brian, you want to talk about how we aggregated it?
Yeah, we started off with 6 buildings, average of 5,000 square feet, and then as when we met with staff, it came out to, you know what, let's just limit the total number of square feet, which is 30,000 square feet of office buildings. You know, we have no desire to build one 30,000 or even two 15,000. I don't want to say 5, because sure enough, we're going to need 55 or 5,500, or maybe it's 6. So, I mean, I think it could be under 7,500, don't you? And we can do that and say no building larger than 7,500 square feet. We're not going to have 3-story buildings. One of the other things I want to mention is when you talked about a site plan, no site plan. We're putting these buildings around the pond, which is at the low, and why I also gave you a copy of that topo is you can see this property slopes way down in the middle. So it's not like I want to put a 55-foot tall building on the corner on the high peak. It's down in the low area. We're keeping every tree that we can. There's some huge trees out there that we've already flagged and we've surveyed and located them. So that's why we're asking for the height to do what he wants to do. But yeah, I think we can amend that to say no office building larger than 7,500 square feet. Still, we have to hold under that 30,000 total. And we've spent many hours out there, and there will be more to come as far as setting where the buildings are going to be. Because originally we talked about no west sun and the windows, and now we've changed our idea on that. You know what, we can put some canopies or something over the windows to make sure we keep as many of the large trees as we can. There's some scrub trees, there's no doubt, but there's some really magnificent. I mean, there's some cedars out there that are probably, I know we don't like cedars in Oklahoma, but these things are gigantic, and we may keep a couple of those. So that's why we're trying to just set the buildings as we're going to field engineer where they go. So,
one thing I might add that I didn't discuss in detail, the first drawing that you saw, this tree-like form, that's part of the reason for the height. What we were figuring was 15 feet floor to floor for three floors is 45 feet. We need parapet, or we might have a peaked roof or something like that, and that's the reasoning for that particular dimension.
One last question. You were going to say something to me first?
One other thing about the 3-story. When we met out there, because of the topography, we talked about some of these may have underground parking, where it may be a split level or just a walkout, what we used to call the walkout basements, but it may be that they park underneath, maybe just 6 spaces, whatever, and then it's a floor and a floor. So that's why we needed the height, but it's to be able to utilize the topography. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's all right. Several places in the staff report, it references 2 access points on each of the section lines, but I only find 1 on Hefner.
Okay. We do only have 1 on Hefner, and at this point, what we are probably not going to do is not have any of the residential property connected to the office part. But I'm okay with just saying 1 on Hefner. We're fine with that. That was written early on before we had developed a lot of more of the plans we were looking at. But I would like 2 on Midwest Boulevard and maybe just 1 on Hefner. We've already flagged those entrances to make sure we have adequate sight distance. Which we do on those, and they're right about where we show them. So 1 on Hefner is fine.
Where's the language in the MDS about the 30,000 square foot maximum? Where is that? I can't find it.
It's not. We made it a TE.
Oh, okay. And so, okay.
I thought we would add to that TE about the 7,500.
Okay, so that's how we're going to address that.
Yeah, we'll add it to that TE if that's what you want to do. I'd put there was a maximum of 6 office buildings, and I think you're right. In that discussion, we did come up with 30,000, but we can do that. That's fine. Like I said, we don't want any massive buildings out there.
Okay. I do have someone who signed up to speak on this item. Ms. McNair, long time no see.
Good afternoon. My name is Nancy McNair. I live at 11401 Hillsdale Drive, which is about half a mile to the west of this site. if you could leave that one up, that would be helpful. When I first received the PUD document, and by the time it was sent to you, it had changed. So some of the comments in my letter won't reflect that because they've taken out the R1, and I appreciate them taking out R1 and O2. The original document had all the uses in O2, all the uses in R1, and just kind of went on, and it was very unclear what was intended. So I appreciate that much. So I do want to just skip over those things that they've already edited and go to the issues that I have still going on. The first one is the fact that it is going from urban reserve land use topology to urban. 6 office buildings is an urban use. And interesting enough that the case 2 after this, which is a change in the land use designation, if you look at your docket, it's actually it's 16 now. Consideration to propose a map amendment to the comprehensive plan. Number one, I truly believe that we should be doing that very same process for this development. We are taking an urban reserve piece of property and now developing it into urban uses, office. So my question is, why are we not following that same process, which is clearly outlined in Plan OKC, commented over and over in Plan OKC about when you go from urban reserve land uses to the other ones, then you go through a process of changing that land use designation. And even in the document, in the staff report, even makes the same comment. That's number one. Why are we not doing that same process? Because that process will answer a lot of questions about traffic, about height of buildings, about utilities, infrastructure, fire, water, sewer, going through that process. Why are we not doing that? And second, utilities. If you read through your document, and I understand that apparently the engineering staff may have changed their mind on some of their comments in the staff report. If you read through the Plan OKC and through the staff report, there's many comments about when you, one of the reasons to switch out of urban reserve is to have urban services. And even the staff report from the engineering says this needs to have urban services, this land use needs to have urban services. So why are we putting offices in an area where there's no urban services, no fire, no water, no sewer, and expecting that to be okay without addressing that? So first, I'd like to point out we should be going through a different process first. Second, we should be looking closely at what the issues are, what the impact here is. What is the traffic impact of 30,000 square foot office building? How is that going to affect the streets? Midwest Boulevard and Hefner Road may be arterials, but they are 2-lane rural roadways with driveways you can barely see off of each of them. You start increasing the traffic with offices here. How is that going to affect the traffic? Go ahead.
Well, let's get responses to those items as we go. What does make this one different that we don't go through the comp plan amendment change?
Well, it's not ready for a switch from urban reserve because it needs to stay in urban reserve. There's no water, sewer, utilities. It needs to be reserved until such time as we have water and sewer. Then it can be developed in an urban fashion.
I think the question is, isn't the proper mechanism for us to have that discussion an application, though? I mean, wouldn't we? Oh, thank you. Come tell us.
Jeff Butler, Assistant Planning Director. Yeah, in this case, we felt like that it was the 40 acres is not being subdivided at all, so it makes it easier to urbanize at some distant future point if that's the goal. So that combined with the utility issue that JJ explained is the reason why, and it may have been a little bit of a close call, but we felt that in the end, the final analysis, it still retains enough of that rural urban reserve character, has the ability to urbanize at some future point that we didn't feel like it was necessary to have.
I still think that 6 office buildings is not a rural development. So it should be discussion, a broader discussion of what's happening in this area and should this go urban, because I can see other properties falling around the same process if this one is approved as in this configuration. And speaking on the same comment of why is there not going to be a plat here, I have to ask a question, Mr. Chambliss. if I have a 10-acre tract on here and I want to cut it out and take the deed over to the county, I could divide this into 10-acre tracts without doing subdivision. Is that correct?
There was a TE to address that. I'm not sure which number it is, but it prevents lot splits less than 5 acres.
Less than 5 acres, but if I have more than 5 acres,
larger than that.
I could subdivide this property without coming here, without coming through a subdivision process. So just saying that no lots under 5 acres doesn't stop this from being subdivided. It just stops it for lots under 5 acres. The subdivision process is part of that whole review process that engineering looks at all the issues that are discussed in your staff reports. So the next time an engineer sees this, it's going to be a building permit, and they're going to, well, what about all the comments we had earlier? What about all the water and sewer and drainage that we had in this comment? Where's that addressed? That's addressed typically at the subdivision process. And if we do not require a subdivision process, just like we talked earlier in another case, say it changes hands in 10 years. There's no way to stop them from subdividing different ways, and you get no water sewer improvements and no street improvements because it didn't go through those processes. So why are we also skipping the subdivision process as well?
Yeah, we're not skipping the subdivision process. I'm going to comment on the, just from my own perspective as a commissioner, not on behalf of staff certainly, and not on behalf of any of the commissioners, but when I look at why we didn't sort of revisit the land use typology here, I'll grant you, I think it's a little gray, but when I read the urban reserve land use typology right out of this handy little booklet they gave me, I don't see that it would require necessarily that this be changed as a comp plan amendment. It says, urban services including city water or sewer are not intended to be provided to UR areas until the designation is removed. So it contemplates the use of septic and sewer and well water, which is what's being used here. It also says commercial and light industrial uses may be appropriate provided they do not negatively impact agricultural operations and character. So it becomes a character question, which I think is a real thing that we're trying to address.
That's definitely part of it.
And I'll agree with you there, but I think there's a difference between a case that's dealing with employment reserve and one that's dealing with urban reserve development that contemplates commercial use. We don't see a lot of commercial use in urban reserve. It's unique. But I really think the challenge is just to kind of move this along. I think the challenge is just we have something here that's very unique in its zoning and its application because it's an individual use, and we have someone who's saying this is not for public use. But my consternation over the whole thing is that at some point it could be carved and you've got these office buildings, and I don't know how we protect that. But this is unique, and I feel like it doesn't strike me as being overly dense or creating some use on the property that's really commercial in nature. It doesn't strike me that way.
I agree with you in that sense, and so it's not that part of that I'm trying to disagree with it. I'm trying to first disagree with the process of why we change from urban reserve to something else, and second, I disagree with why we're not going to require a plat, why there will not be a subdivision application submitted, and also do disagree with the height. Staff recommended 45 feet. The 55 feet, I think, as in my intentional letter, my first letter was that that's almost twice the height of most of the housing in the area. Those are very, talking about the character, this is going to add a lot of traffic that we don't have. Even housing, but I'm not sure what it is because there's no state that tells me how much traffic does 30,000 square foot office have in it. I don't know how to compare that because we don't have that data. And how would that kind of traffic impact the street system? Should there be a light at Midwest Boulevard? If you ever travel that area, Hefner and Air Depot is a pretty high traffic little intersection, and Sooner and Hefner is really getting worse. So does that 30,000 square foot office building now put so much traffic on the road we're going to have lights at these intersections? We don't know that because we don't have a traffic study to tell us if that's going to happen. So those are probably the primary things of taking off the urban reserve designation, office building in this rural area on water and sewer when there's 40 acres of could be more office in the future. Right now it's being limited, and no subdivision requirement, and the 45-foot versus 55-foot height.
With respect to the subdivision requirement, maybe I didn't make clear the purpose of my question. It's not that I want it subdivided or would want it platted or...
Well, there can be a one-lot plat.
I would actually more favor the specific plan route. My concern is more about how we can be sure that what we're looking at here is what gets done. I agree with you that this is a very unique, treatment of this property. I almost always have with me my little cheat sheet of explanation of what PUDs and SPUDs are for, and this is exactly what PUDs and SPUDs are for, to make unique pieces of property with challenges and unique intended uses work in ways that don't necessarily just, go down the list and check the boxes. I don't really have much of any problem at all with what's being proposed here. It really, for me, is more about how we make sure that what's being proposed is what happens. And I had right across the top of my staff report the same question you had about why we're not doing an amendment. But I'm assuaged, I guess, by the explanation. It may be a close call, but I get that. We're not actually. I can't quite get to we're urbanizing this property. I don't think that's what's happening here. Again, I think it's more the challenge of making sure that the vision is fulfilled.
One of the things I might, to make Mr. Cravens a little bit more comfortable, what we could do on that TE that says no lot splits less than 5, we could say no lot splits less than 15. And why I say 15 is because of the residential piece that's on the west side. Is someday his in-laws may not be there anymore. And it could be split off into 15-acre, one lot, one house on that piece. We would never be able to split those office buildings into individual pieces if they're 5 acres each. So,
and I agree with you. That's very unlikely. And
Yeah.
But it's just, again, I always think through. I respect what they're trying to do.
You bet.
And I'm trying to figure out down the road, 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, when it's trying to be sold, what we've opened up the door to. And that's where I think Ms. Powers' consternation comes from, and I just want to better understand that, too.
And
One question would be, why didn't the city require this to be in a plat, so that you could review all the things that you review in a plat?
But it's not a...
There are 1-acre plats, one-lot plats, and all kinds of industrial sections and commercial sections all the time.
I respect your opinion. I'm glad that it's not. It's a 40-acre tract of land. So I'm glad that it's not. I don't think that it should be. That's my opinion on that. But I don't know. I don't know if we need to, if the right thing to do is to continue, or if we think we can get there. I'm uncomfortable with it just because I want to make sure. I like it. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I just want to make sure that, to Ms. Powers' point, it's done that way, and I don't know how to do it.
And I'll say, it's not that I don't like it. Actually, I think after some explanation from Mr. Kuhn and also, it's kind of an interesting thing. I'm just concerned about all the details that seem to be missing.
Can we take 2 weeks, sit down, and hash it out?
I guess I'd want to know what we're hashing out.
I think we want to nail down the details. I think we want to make sure that what we're looking at here is what's going to get done. Talk through with staff, make sure that they're satisfied with, all the I's being dotted and T's being crossed. I don't think there's anything different about what it is you're proposing. At least I'm not hearing that from anybody.
Not to interrupt, my concern is one on utilities. Christopher DeVolder sitting in that room just north of us. He was okay with the utility statement. Why it got put in here, I have no idea, other than these are boilerplate. I think just the saying you always have to have utilities. He agreed that we're okay with that. I'm always concerned about continuance as to what else is going to happen. I had that happen to me one time here. It went for 3 years.
No,
you know what I mean?
And I really respect that, and I'm not in favor of continuance either, especially ones that aren't clear about why we're taking them. I think she did a wonderful job of articulating it. What's going through my head right now? What is to keep him from renting one of these buildings of 5,000 square feet and having people? Now it is open to the public. We can't restrict that.
Okay.
There are details here that would certainly get to my vote. If you want the vote today, I can't vote for it because I'm not comfortable, but I really want to be.
Okay. I'm fine with that. and I'll talk to you about what details is that you want to see, because I think you've heard from everybody. I'm fine with that, as long as this doesn't open up more and more, and because I've seen that a few times. So I think it's a great project, personally. So if you need more detail, I'll get you more detail.
I would just say, with respect to the plan amendment, look, you amend the plan. This is a single-use, single-user, big ego development. Period, the end. Nobody else is going to come out there and say, gosh, this would be a great place for us to, that's a long way away, move your people out there, et cetera. I don't view this as being one that's going to be attractive, potentially, to a lot of commercial activity, one. Two, if you do a plan amendment, to me, then what you have here is a pointer. You don't have a single-use PUD. You don't have a single-owner PUD. You don't have a very tightly, maybe not tightly as we'd like, but a very particular, discrete PUD. What you have is 40 acres urban.
Yeah.
And I can promise you that Mr. Box will be in here as soon as he possibly can going, what do you mean?
No, that's a really good point.
You did a plan amendment and said 40 acres worth of urban without sewer, without water, without anything, and I guarantee you got a big old pointer sitting right out here in the middle of
We're
it.
adjacent to this. Why can't we have it too?
Why can't we have it? You did the same thing and you agreed. So
I think the
you
point
don't-
is we're
be
not
careful what you
changing
ask
the
for,
nature of this
is my suggestion here. You get a plan amendment, you get a plat, you're going to have the next guy coming out here saying, here's my plan amendment, here's my plat, this is exactly what you did next door. Tell me what you're going to do now. So I caution everybody to think about this in that context, because you have a PUD that you can control and get the way you want it versus a plan amendment. So that's my point on that particular topic. And so, Ms. McNair, I get your point. I understand that, but I think that may be a bridge too far for you to get what you're actually wanting in this particular case. So
It may actually be counterproductive.
it may be counterproductive. It may be counterproductive for our future control of the area, and that's really something that I think we need to consider.
I know I'm still the newbie, but it still seems to me that this is within the urban reserve use, right? Because it says, comprehensive plan states that commercial and light industrial uses may be appropriate in UR, provided they do not negatively impact agricultural operations and character of the area. This kind of gray issue is why we have a planning commission. So I think it's totally appropriate for us to make a decision here. My question, as the newbie still on the commission, is what are our options to get to Janice's point? Because I agree that we want to make sure that we actually execute, that they actually execute the way that they've described it. Is it that we need a specific plan? I just want to know what are the tools in the toolbox here to handle it.
I'll be able to answer that question better in 2 weeks.
That's my issue. Deciding up here, I don't know. I think specific plans and consideration, I'd like to talk with the applicant a little bit too, to try to figure out what we can do that brings comfort to the process without, sort of overburdening it as well. There's TEs here that I think we've manipulated the language on. I couldn't do it from up here.
Are you all okay with the 55?
I'm sorry?
Are you all okay with the 55 feet?
I'll be really honest with you. We've talked so abstractly about what's going to be 55 feet. I have no idea what you're talking about that's going to be 55 feet.
I want to make sure, and I'll call you. We'll talk.
Okay.
Yeah, and that can be our specific plan also, and it's part of the PUD. So I'm just saying I'm not coming back later every time I want to do one building, come back before you and have to give you a site plan of that one building. That's all. That's where the reason we're putting it in there. We've got a plan of what we're going to do.
Well, couldn't the guy go out there and build 6 buildings right now if he wanted to? As tall as he wanted?
Yeah, I think that
that were barn-like in style and 50 feet tall and had offices in there and looked really cool, or however tall he wanted to do. Let's kind of think about what we're arguing about here. What we expect to get next go-round. That's just all I'm saying, because heck, he can go out there, build his pond, enjoy himself, and he doesn't have to come down here and talk to us.
That's part of the give and take of PUD is getting a little and giving a little.
Well, and Janice made the point earlier for me, which is why I really want to think it through, is there's actually, I think I'm making the point differently, but she said it, there's a value here in doing it this way that runs with the land.
Yes, I get that. I understand that. But, I mean, you can get fed up and just start throwing stuff in the ground. Rand can figure out how to do it pretty easy, I'm sure. So,
Okay, so we're going to continue this case for 2 weeks?
sure.
We're up for that?
Just so that I can fully understand what we're talking about as far as the TEs and what's on the table, because I took a little bit of notes on that. When we were talking about TE number 3, one of the considerations is that we will not build in the 100-year flood zone. That was part of the changes to TE number 3. Just, again, making sure that as we're, over the next 2 weeks, we're having the same conversation about where we left off. And then in TE number 4, we are saying that the lot splits are not going to be permitted. We're considering the lot splits not being permitted for parcels less than 15 acres rather than the 5. We're talking about a maximum building height in reference to TE 6, a maximum building height of up to 55 feet, and we're also talking about no individual office buildings larger than 7,500 square feet with a total office square footage of no greater than 30,000.
Yes, sir.
Correct? Okay.
Okay, so can I have a motion to continue 2 weeks?
Make a motion to continue PUD 1711, item number 14, to the March 14th meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue item number 14 until March the 14th. Is that what we're talking about? Is that our date? Ms. McNair, do I have your contact information? Staff have your contact information? I guess you're giving it to Curtis right now. So, cast your votes. It's continued. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Keep going.
Item 15, SPUD 1711, SP 1086, application by Bricktown Garage Parking to rezone property at 222 East Sheridan Avenue.
Didn't we continue this case? I thought we continued this case. Yeah, we continued this case.
Item 16 then is CPA 2019-01, consider a proposed map amendment to the comprehensive plan, removing employment reserve, 122nd East John Kilpatrick Turnpike.
I guess staff doesn't care anymore. Oh.
Forgive me, I like to make a grand entrance. This application, we'll get the PowerPoint going up here, is for the application of CPA to lift urban reserve in the northwest quadrant of the city. And I'll give you a little bit of background for urban reserve, just so we can have a little bit of context here.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, that was it. That was it.
So this is to remove the employment reserve, not the urban reserve.
Yes,
is that right?
excuse me, urban employment reserve.
All right.
So here, there's a... This is where the site is located, as I said, in the far northwest area of the city, just where the Northwest Expressway meets the Kilpatrick Turnpike. And one more here. So it's that northerly section. So Hefner Road is about a half mile to the south. 122nd is just right there. The property accesses 122nd. So just a little bit of background on employment reserve. The city, several years ago, probably about 5 years ago or so, partnered up with the Chamber of Commerce and OG&E and produced a study which up to this point was actually the longest plan name, had the record for the longest plan name in the city. The employment land analysis, employment, I can't even remember the name of the study, but it was really long, and included the name action plan in it. But it talked about and looked at the issues that we have, some of which are listed up here, the conversion of non-employment uses to all kinds of things, mostly residential, parcelization, by which we mean large parcels that get broken up into smaller ones, and sometimes it eats away at the edges, but also sometimes it kind of goes in there and fragments things to the point where even though you may have a lot of land left, you can't really do much with it. So that was a big issue we had. Inadequate infrastructure, of course, is always an issue. And then we don't really have an organization or private landholders that are willing to sit on these types of land for long periods of time and be patient and wait for these big employment uses to come in. So that's kind of the reason why we did this study. So really the main intent of what is now the employment reserve designation is to protect these areas for large future developments. And so it's a little bit flexible, kind of like we talked about earlier with the urban reserve. It can be somewhat flexible. Employment reserve is flexible in that it can allow a little bit of alternative uses, but the bulk of it is supposed to be used for these large employment generators or even some industrial uses that may or may not have a lot of employment. There's the site again, so you can see that this kind of blue crosshatched area, a little bit of it also to the south across the Northwest Expressway is context, and this is the the employment reserve area that we're looking at. Here's the zoning. The R1 to the east is something that was fairly recently, it used to be employment reserve, now it's R1. That's been platted. There is a riparian area that does go through this. It kind of bisects the property, which doesn't make it easy to develop, but it is obviously a concern. It does have water and wastewater close by. And it does have fire service. It's a little on the edge of what we like to see for urban levels of service, but it does just kind of catch the edge of it. So the reason why we designated this employment reserve, as I mentioned, the what we call the LNAP, or the Employment Land Needs Assessment and Action Plan, those are the two words I forgot earlier. The needs assessment identified this as a site that has strong potential. It was really well located. As you can see, it's right there on the turnpike entrance and exit. And it's got utilities, it's got services. These are the same things that make it attractive for residential development, and that really is the problem that we've had over the years. Residential development comes first, and they typically kind of like to go to these sites because of their good access. The problem is if we allow all of these to develop as residential or something else, we end up pushing out further and further the sites that can be used for employment, and it gets harder and harder for us to serve those. And we hear from the chamber that, hey, we're losing companies that could come in and bring jobs. We don't have sites available. We can't compete with other cities. This is served by utilities, as I mentioned, and I mentioned the access to the Kilpatrick Turnpike and the Expressway. So in summary, these 4 points here, the reasons why the staff report, why the Planning Department recommend denial, is to preserve those employment lands. As I alluded to, they're still essential for economic development in the city, to allow us to grow and develop and have these sites so that we can be competitive, not just for attracting companies, but for keeping companies that are already here and want to expand. Excuse me. We also, we're concerned about the reduction of the employment land supply. Just to clarify, that 25% is just that little piece that you saw earlier on an earlier slide is that cluster of employment reserve that's right around the expressway and Turnpike intersection. So it does substantially reduce the size of that area, the employment reserve in that area. Another concern is that if you put employment reserve to the north on this, or where this is proposed, residential where this is proposed, it does limit the type of scale, intensity, and possibly the placement of employment uses to the south. If that were to remain employment reserve, which we certainly hope it does, you have compatibility issues there with single-family residential right there on the border. And finally, there is plenty of suitable land for single-family housing in the northwest quadrant. Plan OKC contemplates a long period of time before we have to worry about increasing the supply of land. So there's plenty of supply that's already designated as urban low in the northwest area. And with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
The land use topology overlays are, I mean, that's, what's different from those, from just like our zoning uses?
The difference between a LUDA designation versus zoning?
Yeah.
Well, the zoning is regulatory, of course, and that, once you acquire a zoning, it limits the uses and also, to some extent, the design, the bulk standards, that what you can put on a site. This is just policy, so it is implemented through zoning. So various employment reserve, we tried to. In most cases, they're zoned agricultural because there's nothing going on there. They were far enough out that that's kind of what they came into the city as, and nobody's really planned anything there yet. There are several of these parcels that are something else, sometimes industrial, sometimes a little bit of other uses, but really they need part of the process of getting them to a point where they can be better preserved as getting the right zoning, and of course getting them in the right hands in terms of property ownership. Somebody who is interested in developing them would be a next step, and another step, of course, and these are all in the action plan, is getting them served. Some of them aren't served. For example, the ones to the southwest there, those don't have good access to water and sewer. They're longer term. But of course we worry that once that does happen, those will be attractive to residential development as well. But yeah, those are the things that need to happen to get a site prepared. And we were successful in getting some bond money, not to this site in particular, but to others that are employment reserve, so that we can get the roads widened to the extent that they need to be. And we are working on other properties to actually get not ownership per se, but get them to be in an ownership situation that's more friendly. We've got some other things that we're working on that probably is another discussion.
Well, I mean, the reason I ask is, obviously, next door is, to this site, is a previous item that came through and got their LUDA change. And I'm trying to remember back, and maybe I don't remember correctly, but, we had a big discussion that day, and I'm trying to get to kind of the heart of that issue in this question, because, after the fact, we didn't have a big powwow and sit down and talk about our feelings and whatnot. So I'm trying to get back, and what I remembered a big part of the discussion was, the comp plan came through and made this designation, but, is it fair to, I guess, come in and tell people what they can and can't do with their land once they have it? And I guess to me, a little bit, that's what zoning does. I'm trying to figure out, what is the difference, as citizens come in and say this.
I'll jump on that
The
one.
lawyers are ready.
So the difference, in my view, and why I took issue with the application the last time and why I'll take issue with this one again, is because if you would have gone out and you would have noticed all of the landowners that were being designated as employment reserve, they would have had an opportunity to come in and protest that designation. They did not do that. They were not afforded that opportunity. And so the argument last time that was made by staff was, well, it's AA. They can use it in that form now. They can continue to use it until such time that it can be rezoned for commercial. That is simply not in line with the reality of development patterns, which is that when you don't know what to do with property, you designate it AA, and then when somebody comes along and wants to use it, they come in and rezone it. It is, by definition, in a lot of respects, a placeholder. And so development people that are owning property, that own property, or going to develop property, don't know that this designation exists, and then someone comes along and says, I want to buy it, I'm going to pay X, and unbeknownst to them, the underlying zoning that they agreed to and their ability to have something rezoned, which includes notice and that sort of thing, now they're hamstrung by this. And I want to make clear, just like last time, I totally understand and respect why the Chamber would want these areas designated and located. I totally get why staff and planning would want to identify them and all that. But once an application comes here, to me it's as simple as this. We're balancing the need to provide property owners their rights to sell and have notice and all these things, and the rights of the people around them who are also not notified that these applications are coming before us and that their property is being held commercially. One of the discussions we had last time was, what would the reaction be in this particular area as you look at that map and as you look at the zoning map around it? Would the reaction be of the neighbors if an application came in here to rezone to commercial? I would venture to assume that their reaction would be much more adversarial to commercial development in that area than it would be to a residential development that's compatible with the surrounding use. And they don't have the opportunity to be heard either because they're not notified. So to me, there's all kinds of issues here legally, but what I can't get behind just principally as a commissioner, as a person, as a property owner, is holding someone's land hostage once they come knocking on the door. We're to look at the compatibility of the uses surrounding it, not, forgive me, an arbitrary designation of what would make great commercial development.
Well, I guess my larger question here, and this is me trying to understand where we all stand on the comp plan, is this unique to employment reserve? And I don't want to get off topic today, but is this a unique feeling to employment reserve, or do we see this with the other LUDAs? Do we believe in the comp plan as a commission, and do we look at the other LUDAs and say, we're not gonna from now on ignore these designations?
No, I'm not prepared to go that. Since I'm arguing against it, I'll jump in first. I'm not prepared to go that far. I value the comp plan tremendously. I think it is a terrific guide. I do think employment reserve is fairly unique. I think the closest one would also maybe be urban reserve, how you look at that. And there could be some applications there. But employment reserve is unique to me because what you're saying is you can't do anything residential here, regardless of density, because we're holding it for some future potential commercial need. Whether that need arises this year or 10 years from now, we don't know.
That's not exactly correct.
What's incorrect about it?
Because if it's zoned agriculturally, you can develop it on 5-acre tracts. It's not nothing residentially.
Okay, so economically viable development can't occur in an area that's designated employment reserve if it's presently zoned AA.
Well, I don't know about that, but I also believe, in my recollection, that employment reserve predated this plan.
Yes, that's correct. It was adopted in 2013 before
This plan was
was adopted in 2015.
So, and look, I agree with everything Scott said about those issues, but I look at these like I looked at the last application, PUD versus a change from urban reserve, et cetera, in this particular case. I look at these on a case-by-case application, and I'm extremely familiar with this area like I was last time. And, you know, recall that we did the track back to the east 2 months ago, 3 months ago, however long it was. And, you know, I look at this from an employment usage right now, and I'm, to Jeff's point, I'm heartened that the city is taking steps to develop some of these employment reserve areas, providing better access, providing better utilities, facilitating employment. But this isn't one of those areas. This, I mean, it's got, yes, it has proximity to the Kilpatrick Turnpike, but there's no access. There's no on-ramp there. It has proximity to Northwest Expressway, but you have to go down a cow trail to get there. And that's County Line Road.
Totally agree. I actually think, I mean, that's the point of us, right, is to come in here and use our brain on each one and say, this might be what it says, but we're here to discuss the gray areas. And I'm not trying to litigate this.
No, I know.
Okay, so that's why I was talking big picture. I just guess I want to know, like, if this extended beyond employment reserve, because we don't, the only things I've had in here so far really have been challenges to employment reserve on LUTA changes.
Well,
and I just, big picture, wanted to talk as commissioner.
No, I understand that. Look, I'm all for.
Where are we?
We need tracts of land, but you know, for this one, and as if you looked at the earlier slide, there's a significant creek that runs down through the middle of this tract that would be a barrier, I think, or at least something you'd have to work around to have a major employment, what I would consider a large employment site that would cause you some heartburn. So I get the concept. I think it's, I don't know how I truly feel about it. We need employment, and we need that ability at times to bring in some larger, but I just can't see it in this area. Again, just to remind everybody, we also deeply considered that for an employment to get back to, in its current state, to get back to or get onto the Kilpatrick Turnpike, you go south down County Line, which is a 2-lane road. You either go back east on the Kilpatrick Turnpike, you go back east to, is it Council or Rockwell, Scott? Rockwell. So you go back 2 miles, and then at that time you run into at rush hour, one of the worst intersections in town, and that's because the Paycom intersection, where they've got their significant number of employees that come in and out. And then, of course, 122nd Street north of County Line is still a 2-lane road. So this site right now, I don't know what the plan is to develop this or put the infrastructure, the valid infrastructure in there for meaningful employment. But again, this is not like Northwest Expressway and the Kilpatrick Turnpike, where all of those things exist already. To point
but
to.
The thing of it is, if you have the ability to attract a large enough employer, they make those things happen.
They may do that.
They may bring, you know, employee housing with them. I mean, and in some ways, waiting until you know what it's going to be before you start designing infrastructure kind of makes sense. Yes. So, I mean, we're going to get an opportunity to talk more about employment reserve on, is it the 18th of March? I can't remember the exact date, but we will have an opportunity to do that all together, and we can go into this in greater detail. I think, you know, and there's no question, this is a policy. The difference between a LUTA and zoning, a LUTA is the policy that drives the zoning decisions. Are we in bed with this one, or are we not? I think, you know, clearly we have kind of a mixed track record, frankly. I think that the one thing that we have to, in my humble opinion, stop doing is telling ourselves we're committed to it and yet chipping away at it every time somebody comes and says, but I don't want to do that here. I mean, either we're going to do this or we're not, and we need to stop. Yes, every site has to be looked at individually. There's no question about that. But that doesn't mean that every time somebody decides they want to do something more intense, whether it's commercial or whether it's residential, that we just kind of say, oh, well, maybe we didn't really mean that, and you know, start from scratch.
Well, I would say with respect to this particular tract of land, if it was designated 5 years ago, and it's still, quote, not ready for prime time for employment. I mean, in other words, we've not ingrained it, invested in it at this time. And frankly, I mean, look, whether the process was flawed, et cetera, I'm sure I probably voted for employment reserve at the time because, gee, it sounded like a really good idea. And it may yet turn out to be, I don't know. But it wasn't like we looked at, in our discussion of that, we said, okay, let's look at the Kilpatrick Turnpike and 122nd. No. It was, here's a bunch of areas we've identified, and it was a patchwork of tracks across Oklahoma City that you could, and you couldn't do it on a case-by-case.
Met certain criteria,
area,
in terms
and
of,
these meet these broad brush criteria, but it was not granular to the point that we were reaching down and looking at every site as we are analyzing it when these applications come back up in front of us, where we are looking at detailed conditions with respect to each particular track. Notionally, as a principle, I think it's got some merit, depending upon its application. I do agree with Scott on a lot of his notice provisions, et cetera, and what those mean to an individual landowner. But on a detail-wise, there's no way you could conceptually go track by track by track by track by track. So that's the process.
And I guess my reason for bringing this up was twofold. One was to understand where we as a commission are at. Because, two, I think if we have a problem as a majority with the policy, then I think we're saying to some degree that, yes, we expect every employment reserve to come in, that we have a problem with it. And that would mean, I just want us to understand that where we're going is we're saying employment reserve we aren't okay with. And if you come in, we're going to approve your change. And if that's the case, I understand we're going to look at a case-by-case basis, and there might be exceptions. But what I'm hearing is the first thing I said. If that's the case, then we just need to, as a commission, know that that's what we're saying.
After the first one of these came through, I reflected on it a lot. And I will tell you one thing I would encourage everyone to think about is pretend that this weren't a residential application. Pretend that this were a designation for employment reserve. And pretend that somebody was coming in to rezone this for a large-scale commercial development. And think about the feeling that neighbors were going to have. And by policy, we set it as a precursor for what ultimately we think the zoning should become, for what ultimately could be platted and so on and so forth. And so if somebody came in here and wanted to do this, would we believe in this enough that we would create an incompatible use, right, through employment reserve, some big-scale development, because it was designated as such and we wanted to rely on the comp plan? What I came down to is I wouldn't do that either. I wouldn't be willing to necessarily, in certain instances, say, well, because it's designated employment reserve and it's commercial development, this is a slam dunk. It wouldn't be a slam dunk for me. And so that's why I think the employment reserve is a bit unique. And it is a case-by-case deal. I agree with that completely. So think of it from the other way and see how you feel about that.
Right. I know we're going to talk about this. You said, what's on the 18th?
Did you have something you wanted to say, David?
Let you know I'm here. 522 Colcord Drive. I was also representing the applicant to the east, in which the commission did vote to remove that and go to the urban low. So I think you guys have touched everything I would have said.
I'm ready to make a motion if there's no discussion.
Is there anyone else here who wants to be heard on this matter? I hesitate to ask, but I will. Okay.
I will make a motion to approve the removal of the employment reserve land use typology layer for application CPA 2019-0001. Second.
I have a motion and a second to remove the employment reserve land use typology for as set forth in item number 16. I'm just going to check real quick. So I have a motion and a second. Would you cast your votes, please? It's approved. The removal is approved. Mr. Butler, when is our thing with the Chamber on Employment Reserve?
Let me check. I'm not sure the exact date, but I know we've got it set coming up soon. I'll get back to you.
Isn't there also something this afternoon, some open house, BRT?
Yes, yes. And I don't have that. I don't have the information on me handy, but it is going on today.
See if you could find it for me and scribble it out, and I'll do it at the end of the meeting.
Sure.
Thank you.
Is that a public event?
I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to know.
I think so.
So it's the Northwest Corridor Bus Rapid Transit Project. It's from 4 to 6 p.m. at 1329 Northwest 23rd Street. It is essentially just a open house to come and go event, allow attendees an opportunity to speak with staff, provide feedback on the proposed project.
Thank you.
Okay, item 17, PC 10564, application by Shadow Valley Development to rezone 9418 122nd to the R1 district.
This is corresponding rezoning application, taking it from AA to R1.
Was that all you were going to say?
It's now in conformance with the comprehensive plan, and staff recommends approval.
Is there anybody present who wants to be heard on this matter? Any questions of Mr. Box? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve item number 17 for recommended approval, City Council for PC 10564.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 17. Would you cast your votes, please?
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Hinkle, did you vote? Mr. Pennington, did you vote? Okay, that's it. Are we done? 17, that was the last item? Okay. Additional items, communications and reports. This would be a good time to announce the open house thing. I know. Planning Commission committees, there aren't any at the moment, are there? Oh, I guess I should, we've started on our process of selecting a team for our code update. So, and it's going pretty well, actually. So I just thought I'd let you guys know that. I don't think there's really anything else going on.
What was the 18th? You said something on the 18th that we're going to discuss further?
I think, yeah, if Mr. Butler comes back, I'll give you a date. We'll send an email out, but yes, there's a thing coming up for us to talk about employment reserve. We're going to have the chamber come and speak and kind of remind us what it was we were doing when we did that and why we care. I have for you, I guess this is more under Planning Commission members' things. I'm going to give Scott and Rusty one of these, and then Asa, you keep one. Mr. Pennington and I met with staff this week. Eric Winger was nice enough to come and sit down with us and kind of talk us through the finalization of the plans for the I-44, I-235, I always mess that up, overlay, which is going to turn into this kind of really, like high-rise flyover thing. This is, a project that has been droning on for as long as I've been on the Planning Commission, and it's been designed and redesigned and configured and reconfigured, but they've kind of come down to the end now. There's a little bit of information there on the timelines, the color coding. But they've finalized what it's going to look like, where it's going to go. There's not going to be a bridge across for Santa Fe across the highway and other things that have been talked about and discarded over the years. My concern about it personally was principally about how it would affect development along Northwest 50th Street, and we continued the item today that's probably most relevant to this, but we'll get around to it again, the idea of residential conversion, commercial zoning, and the impacts of that. So I personally was, or professionally as the case may be, was comforted by these plans. I do not think that they're going to create any additional pressure for that kind of conversion along 50th Street, which I've always been very concerned about since they started this process. So I just wanted to bring you those just so that you can have them and for your own review and information. I would like for staff, if they would please, I realized today, to draw up a resolution of commendation for Commissioner Allen, and I think we'll do that next time, Deb. We lost a planning commissioner, a longtime planning commissioner recently, Jimmy Allen, Ward 4, who I served with the whole time I've been here, and so I want to do a little resolution of commendation for him. I think it would be appropriate, and we'll talk about that next time. I don't think I have anything else, though. Anybody else? Shall we start at 8 and go down? Do you have anything, Rusty? No? Scott?
I want to encourage everybody to go back to our meeting from last time and review item number 13, which is PUD 1700. I spent a lot of time with that after the fact. I would encourage all of you to go look at that one carefully. That was the rezoning application for the DTD2, where we pulled it into the DTD2, which is a special zoning district, and then provide design review to essentially took it out of the purview of the Downtown Design Review Committee, provided it to a private party, and then kept the opportunity to review specific plans. I don't want to make any more comments about it, but I want to encourage all of you to go look at that again and read that case very carefully and think about, from a policy standpoint, I think what we did there by recommending approval. I take issue with, I'm going to have some comments for staff about, but I think everybody should look at that pretty carefully.
Mr. Pennington? Mr. Highsmith? Ms. Hinkle? Ms. Coffey? Ms. Ansley? Okay, well then, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, I guess I should ask staff. I'm sorry. Did you have something you want to say? Did you have something you want to say? Okay. Now, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor say aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned.